our webinar, our space webinar with Dr. Paul White. We're talking about steps to building a culture of appreciation. Changing culture and workplace culture are such hot topics these days for many of our staff-based customers and for many of our non-customers. We really want to provide value in different ways, not just as a software provider, but we hope to help employers to enable better ways to reach and build their culture with employees. So thank you for joining us, Dr. Paul White. We
My
appreciate it.
pleasure. Yeah, I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, it looks like we have a great group today. I'm excited to see what kind of questions you guys have and look forward to answering those with you, Dr. White, at the end. All right, let's get started. I am Carla Kath. I am the Director of Customer Success Strategy at Staffbase. You can see some of the brands that we work with here. But again, we hope to reach all employers that are looking to better communications within their workplace. We have been in business since 2014. We are based in Germany and now the United States. And we are excited about growing our team, and we're excited about helping to grow your team. So thank you for joining us. And there you go, Dr. White.
All right. Well, Carla, thank you, and I'm glad to be here with you all. Carla's put up a few things that I've helped produce, some books and other kinds of things. And we're going to talk today about how do you really show appreciation to employees, and what happens when employees don't feel valued and appreciated, and how employee recognition programs really often don't hit the mark, and how it is sort of different, and we'll make sure we get practical as well. So let me just tell you a little bit about me. I think it's always fair for people to know who they're listening to. So I am a psychologist, and I have worked with families and family-owned businesses, and now corporations, as well as all different kinds of government agencies and so forth, for a number of years. Written 4 books, 3 of them along with Dr. Gary Chapman, on workplace relationships, the 5 languages of appreciation of workplace, that we're going to talk about today. Sink or Swim is sort of a nice, fun story version, sort of like Who Moved My Cheese. That's an introduction. Along the way, wound up being impacted by a lot of negative reports from workplaces. So we did some research on toxic workplaces and how to survive them and not become one. And then recently, a follow-up book, The Vibrant Workplace, on sort of how do you really apply this in the different kinds of obstacles as an organization you need to overcome. I speak and train leaders around the world, and enjoy doing that. I get to learn a lot from the clients I work with. And then I'm pretty straightforward and practical, just tell you what I think, and no hidden messages. And I like to have fun, and hopefully we'll have some fun here today together, because otherwise it's not fun, right? And you can quote me on that. So here's a little start. I mean, this guy gets an award and it says not our worst employee, and he says, well, just the same, it takes to get an award. Well, that's, he's trying to make the best out of bad situations, but sometimes that's the way it feels, is that you get something that's not really that meaningful and you're trying to make yourself feel good about it. We're going to deal with some logistics. You can ask questions via the chat box, and Carla helped me sort of gather those and ones that we want to address, some maybe through and end. People always would like handouts of the slides, and so we'll provide that to you. You're going to need to email me, and this will be sent out an email from Carla as well. But if you send an email to us at admin@appreciationatwork.com, we'll send you a handout version of the slides, as well as have a research paper that shows over 100,000 people that have taken our inventory and how they want to be shown appreciation, and then also give you a discount if you want to try out our inventory. Here are the goals for today. I want you to understand the importance of appreciation and how it differs from traditional employee recognition. and want to define the core principles that underlie communicating authentic appreciation. We're really focused on authenticity and genuineness. I'm not here, or when I train people, it's not to try to make it look like or go through the motions. It's that, if you feel that you value somebody, how to do that, and if you don't, how to deal with that. I'm going to give you some practical suggestions and tools that you can use immediately, even today. And again, hopefully we'll have some fun together. Here's another cartoon I sort of like, or it sort of tells about the sad state of a lot of employee recognition programs. He says, every time you do something right, I'm going to punch your rewards card, and when you reach 10,000 punches, you earn a high five. And unfortunately, that's sort of the way a lot of employee recognition programs are structured, where you have to do a lot of things to get not much. And we want to get beyond that. So let me tell you about the importance of appreciation. First of all, and this is a key stat as well as research, that 79% of the people who quit their jobs voluntarily, I mean, they're fired, they're leaving, said that a lack of appreciation was one of the key reasons that they were leaving. Now, most managers, business leaders think that people leave for more money, and that's actually not the case. I'm finishing a revision of our book, and new research shows that about 89% of managers think people leave for more money, and it's more about 23% do. So it's important, because if you have key team members that you want to keep, more and more, it's really that they need to feel valued and appreciated. In fact, the Boston Consulting Group did a global study, because people ask, well, is this just a U.S. sort of ego-based kind of phenomena? And it really is global. I mean, they studied 1,000 employees, and they asked them, what are the different reasons you enjoy the jobs? The number one, which surprised me, to be honest, is that when they feel appreciated for their work. Interestingly, good relationships with colleagues and with their supervisors were number 2 and 4, and financial returns was all the way down. So, and there was another study, I don't think we're citing that one here, from the Chicago Tribune, that found exactly the same results. What's interesting is that about half of managers think they're doing an okay job of recognizing employees for doing a good job, which, when I ask, how well do you think employers or managers think they're doing, often people say, well, they think 90% of them think they're doing a great job. About half feel like they're doing an okay job. The problem is only 17% of the people who work for them feel like the manager does a good job of recognizing them for work well done. So there's a disconnect there, and we've got to figure out what that is and why it's there. So the question, becomes, if it's important, why don't most people feel valued? Well, first of all, they just don't hear much positive. I mean, I had a friend who was an accountant, and he said, yeah, I do the best job I can, and I'm generally, on top of it. But he says, as long as I'm doing it, I don't hear anything. He said the silence is deafening. But as soon as I make a mistake or I'm a little bit late, boom, they're all over me. And so people just feel like they don't hear much unless, they've done something wrong. And it's sort of like this gal. She says, if I walk past your desk without stopping to criticize your work, that counts as a compliment. And, unfortunately, some people manage that way. And I was actually dealing with an international group in Northern Europe. And let me see if I can get the saying right. But they said, to not be yelled at loudly is praise enough. It's sort of an old German and Norwegian saying. So it's sort of like, if you're not getting yelled at, consider it good to go. The problem is that doesn't really cut it for most people these days. Secondly, people don't feel valued because the messages that are sent often don't seem that meaningful to them. Lots of times managers will send out a group email and say, way to go team, we met our goals for the quarter, which is fine. It's a good starting point, but that doesn't really address the person who stayed late to put the data in and make sure that it was there for the report to be created. And so we do these sort of global, sort of generic kinds of messages. And in fact, we do polls with our people that receive our newsletter, and we ask them, what messages don't you like to hear? And one of the top messages they don't want to hear is good job. Why? Because it's just sort of vague in general. And I had one tech person said, my manager wouldn't know if I'm doing a good job or not because I'm a techie and they don't know it. They just manage me. So we've got to figure out how to make that better. Also, in some places where there's really a performance-based recognition program, which is fine, after a while, people just feel like, they're just a producer, that they only hear good things when they reach or exceed goals, and nobody really gives a rip about them as a person. In fact, I had a friend who's a top salesperson. She said she laughed when she heard about my book, and she said, they don't give a care about me. As long as I'm meeting my goals, I'm good to go. If I'm not, I'm out of here. And so, she had no sense of any kind of personal appreciation aside from, being a producer. And then lastly, there are a lot of factors that happen in employee recognition that just make it come across as not being very sincere. And so, I've had people say, yeah, whatever, we'll go through the motions, and they do it. But this month it's IT, next month the employee of the month is going to be, from accounting, and then it's customer service, and it's political, and so they don't think it's, genuine anyway. So the problem is when staff don't feel valued, there's some negative things that happen. And again, I'm just finishing some research on this, and it's amazing what happens. And so when people don't feel valued, tardiness increases, not only getting to work late, but back from breaks late, back from lunch late. On the right-hand side, they call in sick more often. We know that a couple of years ago, there was a study that showed that 65% of employees said that they call in sick at least once a year when they aren't really sick, and that rate was going up as they also did not feel valued and appreciated. We know that when people don't feel valued, they tend to not follow the policies and procedures, that they just sort of do whatever and let somebody else clean up the mess, essentially. Productivity decreases, especially in the sense of sort of creative problem solving, because when you have a problem to solve, it takes emotional energy, and if you don't feel like anybody cares, you're not going to put it out. So you just sort of go through the motions. You have a negative culture that develops a lot of sort of grumbling and complaining and gossiping. Higher staff turnover is probably one of the big results of sort of all of these together, because we know that staff turnover is one of the highest non-productive costs for businesses. And we're moving into an era where you need to keep the people that you value, because you may not be able to replace them. The marketplace for valuable employees is really shrinking. One of the interesting things is when people don't feel valued, practically, they just have what we say a chip on their shoulder. I mean, they're sort of irritable. They bring up stupid complaints about little things, about whether it's a parking spot or where their desk is set and all this kind of stuff. And so they're just, sort of more touchy about kinds of things, whereas when they feel valued, a lot of those kinds of things slide off. You tend to have more customer complaints because they're not really interacting in a positive way with your customers. And all of that, if you're a leader, all those things go together to create a headache for you to deal with. And one of the things that we know is that when staff feel valued, managers enjoy their work more. So that's a good thing to shoot for. Let me grab a drink here real quick. So around the issue of staff turnover, a recent research said that 53% of employees say that if they would remain, they wouldn't leave if they felt like they were more appreciated by their bosses. So, and there's other studies, it really makes an impact because, again, remember that first one, 79% of the people say that they leave because they don't feel valued. So it's really important to sort of incorporate into your leadership and management practices in order to keep your team. So, if appreciation is so important, why isn't it communicated more? There are a lot of reasons, but the number one and actually number two reason cited by employees and managers that I work with is busyness. I was working with one group and we dealt with busyness, and we were going on to the second reason, and somebody said, no, you don't get it. That's the next one too. I mean, if we don't deal with the issue of busyness, and so as a result, and actually from the beginning, I'm a psychologist and supposed to, understand and know about behavioral change, both for individuals and groups. And so from the beginning, we've addressed this, and I'm not here, and our organization, the resources that we provide, it's not to create another to-do list for you. Nobody needs another to-do list. Most of us already have two. We've got a regular one and then sort of our secondary project one. We don't need an appreciation to-do list. And so what we've done is help create this model in a way to help you do what you're almost doing or already doing, but not doing it effectively, because we know that you don't have a lot of time and energy. In fact, initially I was sort of embarrassed by the simplicity of our model because psychology like to do this deep stuff and all that, and but in actuality, the simplicity of the model and the 5 languages has helped us because most people don't have much time or mental or emotional energy to sort of learn and keep on to things. So the fact that we got 5 languages with visual symbols, you can remember them, it makes it easy to apply. The other reason that appreciation isn't communicated is because most managers say, well, hey, we got an employee recognition program, what else do they need? Well, a couple of issues about that. One is that most performance-based employee recognition, well, actually, most recognition is about seniority and length of being employed, which is not motivating at all for anybody. It's not like, oh, I'm going to work really hard for, so I get another plaque in 5 years. And secondly, when it's performance-based, it tends to only reach the top 10 to 15% of your workforce or your team. So that means you got a whole group, and let's say we take out the bottom level of people that aren't doing well, you still got a middle 50% that aren't being recognized for performance, and they're not hearing anything. They're going to leave, and you cannot only run with stars. You've got to have solid foundational team members as well. And so sort of hoping that employee recognition is going to make it work, I'm going to tell you it's not, and we'll talk about that here in a second. In fact, one of the things that's been fun, I'm a psychologist, we don't use the word fact very often, or absolutely, but we do know how to train leaders and employees how to successfully communicate authentic appreciation. Key term there is employees. It's not a leader-based and focused program because most leaders and managers don't have time to be able to focus on everybody, and we found that people want to know how to communicate appreciation and encouragement to one another. And so what we do is we train both leaders and team members so that it goes both ways. I mean, both top down, sideways, as well as sort of bottom up, and done it in a lot of different kinds of settings. And so focusing on employees versus you feeling like, when am I going to do this? It's to help train your team members to participate. And it gives them a sense of empowerment to be able to be involved and know how to communicate to one another. So here's sort of a basic client list. It looks like on my screen's a little whacked out, but tech companies, the military, manufacturing, a lot of medical, government places, insurance, financial.
It's not industry specific, right?
Yeah, it's not industry specific. I mean, 650 colleges, long-term nursing facilities, TSA, for those of you that are not in the U.S., that's our airline security, and I tend to tease, if we can do it with TSA, we can do it with anybody. They sort of have a bad rep. So yeah, we can, and that's one of the fun things is helping clients in different and new industries. We've got a mining client, all different kinds of things that how to figure out to make it work for them. So I just want to sort of emphasize that when we talk about appreciation, it's not the same as employee recognition. They can overlap some, but really we want to be authentic about it, not just go through the motions. In fact, when I talk to leaders and even employees about their employee recognition program, I usually get a roll of the eyes, and I get, somewhat our apathy or apathetic. It's like, yeah, I guess we have one. Go down there once a quarter and go to the break room or the conference room, and I'll get some donuts and then I leave. Sarcasm. I had a guy in Chicago. He said, oh yeah, we got an employee recognition program. And he said, in fact, I won Employee of the Month once. And he said, one of the deals is you get a special parking spot. And he said, but I ride my bike to work and I still got the parking spot. It's sort of like, whatever. And then you add a little bit of tinge of anger, and lack of trust. And, I had one gal who was a nursing manager say, it's fine, we're going through this, but to be honest, we're just doing this to make the bosses look good to the board. They don't give a rip about us individually, and it's to make the employee engagement scores go up. And they just, there was a lack of trust that we had to deal with. So unfortunately, that's sort of the common kind of response from a lot of people when we talk about their employee recognition. So and we have a training process that we go through, and there's an online train the trainer program that I'll share with you later. But we go through more specifics about why most employee recognition programs don't work, but the bottom line is they're not perceived as genuine. They're very viewed as very organizational, mechanic, impersonal, generic, just everybody gets the same thing, and it doesn't have anything to do with me. In fact, I had one leader tell me, she said, yeah, I've got Employee of the Year. And the leader, CEO, said, I just want to tell you how much I appreciate you and all this. And she told me later, she said, he doesn't appreciate me. He couldn't pick me out from a group. She said, now I understand that they're recognizing me for, producing good work, but it's not about me as a person. And, just use of the word sort of created a negative reaction for it.
Dr.
So,
Wright, we have a question here
sure.
about recognition. Chris says, do you find performance-based recognition is effective?
Yeah, great question. And it's actually sort of how we got to the problem we're at, in that performance-based recognition, when designed and implemented well, which those are two caveats, is effective in improving performance. And that's what it was originally designed for. It started actually in the early 1900s and has moved on. And there's lots of research that shows how when recognition and rewards are used and designed appropriately, they support and encourage the right kind of behaviors, which was good. We want that to happen. The problem is that as we've moved into the 21st century, that's not the sole issue. And recognition companies and programs have tried to use recognition to make individuals feel valued, and that's where it doesn't work. So the difference, and you sort of set me up here, Chris, is that, recognition really is focused on performance, and when we do that, it works well, except for it only hits that top tier of employees typically, whereas appreciation is focused on the person. So we just got to make sure, and when they're together, and that's been a fun thing for me, is to work with groups that their company has a good, solid performance-based recognition program that's going well, and then we help sort of fill in the gaps with appreciation to help the individuals feel valued beyond just performance. Then things really go well. So when we talk about appreciation, again, I sort of mentioned that. I get embarrassed about how simplistic some of this is. The core principle is not everybody feels appreciated in the same way. Ta-da! It's not like groundbreaking, and we intellectually assent to that. But the fact is that most of us, if we look at our behaviors, tend to do the same things, maybe 2, 3, if you're lucky, for everybody around you. So we know, yeah, everybody feels appreciated in different ways, but we tend to either write an email or stop by and check in or whatever it might be, or bring them, a little something. And part of it has to do with that we don't know what else to do. And so that's been part of the fun part for us to both learn from people what they want and then be able to help to, train and communicate that to others. So there's 5 languages, and some of you may be familiar with the 5 love languages, which Dr. Chapman wrote. It's applied to personal relationships. It's a great book. Sold, how many million? 13 million copies, I think, the last I heard. It's in 50 languages. It's just super. And so he and I approached him about trying to apply it to work-based relationships, and we sort of felt like appreciation was the core concept in the work setting. And so the names of the languages are the same as the 5 love languages, but obviously they differ in how they're applied. So words of affirmation, quality time, acts of service, tangible gifts, and yes, even physical touch. And in the current culture of things in the U.S., that's even more touchy, if you will, but still it applies, and we'll talk about that. So again, in our fuller training, we sort of go deep on this stuff, but let me just give you some examples about words of affirmation. So one of the things, we have an online assessment tool called the Motivating Appreciation Inventory that identifies each person's primary way or language that they like to be shown appreciation, their secondary, and then their least valued one. And words is actually the most frequently one chosen. We've had about 130,000 people take it, the inventory, and about 45% of people choose words as their primary language. So that's good. And so if you don't know what somebody's language is, that's probably your best guess. The problem is, if you got 100% of people minus 45, you're still missing 55%, right? And so it gets us part way there, but not all the way. And so it can be, individual where you just, as a supervisor or even a colleague, tell somebody what they've done that you value and appreciate. You have sort of a simple model of use their name, be specific and tell why it's important, either to you, to the organization, or your clientele. So it might be, Stephanie, hey, thank you for showing up regularly and even a little bit early to open up the office. I really value that because that way I don't worry about if a customer is going to show up and we're not there to greet them. And so use their name, you're specific about it, not the good job kind of thing, and then why it's important. That's often a piece that we miss. Now, it can be written, obviously, and it can be in front of a group. Most people, if you're going to sort of guess without knowing their specifics, it's better to do it privately. Written, and people ask me about generational differences, and we've just done some research on that. One of the things that I'm a boomer, and in the old days when you got a nice gift from your grandma, where you had to write a handwritten note of thank you, and older generations still tend to focus on that and value that. And one of the things that we found is that younger employees, especially younger guys, don't really give a rip about getting a handwritten note. Women, it's still about maybe 50% are okay with it. What's more important for the younger employees is the speed in which you give them feedback. Today, 24, 48 hours. After that, you're sort of into history, so you got to get back to them quickly. And that can be obviously a text or an email. It could be a handwritten note, but just don't have a sense that it's going to, really jack up the value a whole bunch. Now, it's important to note that for some people, words are not only not important, they're sort of negative. I mean, there's a group of people that, it's like words are cheap. Don't tell me you appreciate me, show me. And so that's why it's important to understand the other languages as well. I'm trying to think of anything else I want to.
Yeah, Dr. Wright, we have another question. Is it that you have to choose one of these languages over another, or is it that you can do a combo or do all five? Just evaluate what works. How do you figure out which language to use?
So it is important to use the right language and even the right actions within the language. And I'll give an example of that when we move to time. But we know that all of us have some primary way that we value and respond more to appreciation and encouragement than others. So, for some people, I'm a words guy, so if you give me a compliment that's specific, I'm good. That jazzes me. If you give me a gift, it's like, okay, thanks, no big deal. So part of the issue, and this relates to the busyness, is we want to help team members and leaders find out and learn the specific ways that individuals on your team, want to be shown appreciation, so that you're not wasting time and energy doing things that doesn't matter. Okay, so somebody that words don't matter to them, don't spend a lot of time trying to craft the right email to tell them. If time's important, go stop by and hang out with them. And so we want to be able to identify the language and also the action. So let me give an example about that quality time. Quality time is really largely focused attention. There's different kinds, and one of the things that we found originally when we did our assessments with people and asked them found out what their language was, I had a manager say, well, my team members, their language is quality time. What does that mean? What am I supposed to do? So, which was a reasonable question. And so we then added a section to the inventory where once we identified a person's primary language, we then send them and say, okay, what actions within that language are important to you? Because quality time, it could be, some people would like some individual time with their supervisor and manager and be able to either give some input or ask or dialogue about kinds of things. I've had team members say, hey, I do not want individual time with my manager. They're pretty intense. I'm sort of shy. I don't need that, but I like hanging out with my friends, and I like to go to lunch or go out afterwards. And so the other feedback that we got when we developed the action list is people said, well, it depends who it is, because I might invite my friends, my colleagues over to watch a sporting event or over this weekend for a barbecue, but I don't want to invite my supervisor. So we allow people to choose not only the actions, but also from whom they want those actions. And so the more specific you can be, first of all, you hit the mark, because that's the goal, right? It's to encourage and show appreciation, not just to do the action, but to communicate that you really do value them. And so we want to be able to identify what that's like. Now, in the majority American culture, there's some gender differences this way that most, I'll say most, women tend to like focused attention. They want your full attention, maybe, sitting across from you, you're looking at them, listening, and not doing anything else. And the not doing anything else is important. I mean, not answering the phone or looking at your cell or whatever it might be. For guys tend to build relationships shoulder to shoulder and do things together. And in fact, across the table, sort of one-on-one can feel somewhat intense and intimidating to some guys. And so you have to think about some of those gender effects in the workplace, that if you're a male leader working with a female team member, and quality time and personal focus and attention is important to her, first of all, if you schedule it, try not to reschedule it because that sends a bad message. But clearly, you want to give her your full attention and focus. Whereas with guys, lots of times it's doing something. It could be going out to lunch. It could be saying, hey, I need to run down to the supply room or the warehouse, check something out. Why don't you come with me? And guys tend to talk while they're doing something else. So just know that that's important. Quality time is the second most requested and favored language of appreciation by the workforce. It's about, for the general workforce, it's about 27%. What we're finding, we're just going to be publishing a study on the differences across generations. We're finding that younger workers, 29 and under, tend to value quality time more in the 33 to 35%. And so, which makes sense with sort of their focus on collegiality and that kind of thing. So as I mentioned, it can be, meeting individually, but it also can be, hanging out with a friend, or like I said, guys watching sports and that kind of stuff. And that's not a hard and fast rule, but there's some patterns that way. Acts of service is not the issue of rescuing a poor performer. It's really just doing small acts that can help make a person's day or week go better. And here's a context to think about it. If you're working on a time-sensitive project and you're pushing to get it done, what's something that somebody could do that would help make that go better for you? I mean, it could be bring in lunch so you can keep focused. It could be, sort of cover your calls so that you can keep focused on this. It could be, hey, come in and help do some of this little clerical work so I can keep focused on the major task. Acts of service is a very work setting and industry specific kind of issue, because for a school teacher, an act of service might be to watch her kids, her class kids, over lunch so she can get some paperwork or phone calls done. In the hospital, it could be, covering a nurse's patient lights so that they can, get their charting done. And actually, and it can be, helping move stuff when they need it. What's interesting is that the number one request in sort of the general workplace for an active service is to help get my computer to work right. And I was actually talking to a group of managers of a very large multinational computer company. They'll let you sort of fill in the gaps there, and they started to sort of boo and hiss me a little bit teasingly. I said, no, hey, get a life, because in the real world, if your computer's not working, you're stuck. Now you may not be able to solve it as a manager, or even a colleague, but you may help facilitate it. So acts of service is about 22 to 24% of the general workforce. Acts of service actually goes down for younger workers, and that's sort of where they flow into time more. But it's important, because there are some people that it's just like, don't tell me things, don't give me things, just help me get stuff done. And you do that, I know you're on my team, you value me. As opposed to, I mean, the way you sort of torque a person who has acts of service as their primary language is if you just compliment them and never help them, especially if you're standing there and sort of telling them how to do it. So lots of times, you really need to get in there and help them at least for a little bit. Tangible gifts are not, it's not compensation, it's not bonuses, it's not, uh, monetary cash rewards or whatever. It's really small things that show that you're getting to know your colleagues and what they like. This really was where we focus. You can see that it's about the person. Okay, so it could be, their well, let me say this. So if we think about what the most common gift is in the workplace, as far as in this kind of thing, it's food. So it could be their, their favorite cup of coffee, bagels, pizza, we bring in, you know, um, rolls and that kind of stuff. I try to encourage people to generally be healthy, but the god of the food, the food of the gods is chocolate, so you can't miss with chocolate.
I'm
And
glad you added that one.
yeah, and so that is key. Now, what's interesting is that a lot of employee recognition programs use rewards and gifts and all that, and it's actually a huge part of what they do. And our research shows that less than 10% and actually 6% of employees choose tangible rewards as the primary way they want to receive appreciation. So as I've talked to different rewards and recognition companies, that are sort of ethical, at least because some aren't, is that a lot of companies are wasting a lot of money on gifts. It's not like people are going to give it back, right? But I've had people say, if I get a gift, but I've never heard any, word of encouragement. Nobody ever stops by to see how I'm doing. Um, I never, get any help when I just need a little help to get caught up, and I get a gift. It feels pretty superficial, and they tend to discount it. Now, interestingly, gifts along with their primary language, assuming it's another one, can be very impactful, especially if it's personal. So, mentioning that it could be food, but it can be things like, let's say it's spring coming up. So baseball season's coming up in the States. And so if you know somebody likes baseball, and so you get them one of those magazines at the grocery store or whatever that's about, the preseason kinds of things. Or we know we have March Madness coming up in the basketball. It could be about that. It could be about somebody's that they're training for a half marathon, so you get them a running magazine on stretching. Or it could be about quilting or cooking if they have that, or gardening as far as a hobby. So it's about them as a person and saying, hey, I saw this, I thought you might be interested. And interestingly, in this context, tangible gifts really is about the thought that counts. The way that you offend people that value gifts, and the reason I refer to that, because we did some research and wrote an article on that, people's primary language of appreciation is also the language often that they're most easily offended in. So because both positive and negative messages really hit them. Tangible gifts, if you give everybody the same thing, you've just sort of wasted money, because for them, it's about the personal thought that you thought about, and if everybody gets the same thing, it doesn't mean a whole bunch. Now, interesting, physical touch, people, and in fact, when I talk to HR managers, we tease about having paramedics there to help them deal with the stress of, we're going to get sued. But in actuality, physical touch, we talk about it for a couple of reasons. One, Dr. Chapman, co-author, he studied anthropology. He said, I don't want to advocate a touchless society, even in the workplace, because appropriate physical touch can be very meaningful. And also it happens. I mean, and it's largely spontaneous celebration. It's like when, you complete a project, a high five, or, you fix something, a fist bump, or you make a big sale, a congratulatory handshake. We actually found that a pat on the back is cross-culturally the most accepted form of physical touch as far as appreciation goes. And so, but it differs regionally, right? I lived in Atlanta for a while and lived in the South, and down there they hug, and side hugs, and well, I dealt with one group that we have these buttons about their languages, and then they have an NHA little designation, meaning no hugs allowed for certain people. They just don't touch me, right? And in New York, New Jersey, if you guys are there, it's sort of like physical touch is just, hey, just sort of nodding the head and saying, hey, across the room. That's about as close as you get. So you got to pay attention to that. But flip side of it is, we have our materials in Spanish and other languages, and our Latin friends are very physical, and they, kiss on the cheeks and warm greetings. And so it differs. Is it that important? Probably not, but it happens, and so we need to learn how to deal with that. Second core principle is that people want to know that they're valued both by their supervisor and their coworkers. One of the core things I want to help leaders know is this is not your full responsibility to be able to show appreciation to everybody. It is, I think, can be your responsibility to help make sure everybody gets trained in it and learns about it, but help colleagues know how to encourage one another. And encouragement is the same as appreciation, except the focus is really the present and the future. It's coming alongside and saying, hey, hang in there, keep going. Who knows when you're having a bad day first? Your colleagues, right? And so they're the ones that can be able to encourage you and come along. And also they may really, what you do can make a big difference in their life. And so that's really an important thing among colleagues is if there's somebody that does stuff that makes your day go easier, it'd be good to call attention to that and show them some appreciation. So one of the things, and this looks a little bit funky to me, but there's a chart that we have here. It's I'll get a good version of it when we send out the handouts, but it's a chart that we can identify team members and what languages they are their primary one, which is the top darker form. The middle is their secondary language, and then the lower one is the least one. Because you don't want to be doing stuff that they just absolutely don't want and don't value. And this is
Dr. White, sorry to interrupt. Does that mean that you ask them what language they would most prefer? Okay.
No. So yeah, let me see. I guess I did not include that part here. We developed this online inventory because, and there's a free code that comes with in the back of the book, or you can just buy codes individually. And in fact, I'm going to offer that they cost $15 a piece. They dial down for bigger groups, but if you guys write, I'll give you a discount and be able to take it just for $10. And it takes about 10 or 15 minutes online, and it takes you through a series of questions and identifies your primary language, your secondary, your least valued, the actions that are most important to you in your primary language, and then be able to share that with others. In our culture in the U.S., it's a weird conversation to say, hey, if I, appreciate you, how should I show you? I mean, it's just like, I don't know, tell me thanks, and that's about all you get. So it's a difficult conversation. And so I know it sounds a little self-serving, but we really have not found a good way to get at it, except for maybe it's the side door of encouragement, because people are a little more in touch with encouragement and say, when you're discouraged or need to be encouraged, what can somebody do, or what has somebody done that helped encourage you? And people can think about that. It's like, I don't know, help me out some, or bring me some chocolate, or whatever it can be. But otherwise, really finding out and having team members take the inventory and then share that together is probably the best way to do that, or is the best way. And it creates about a, I don't know, 10 or 12 page PDF report you get right there. Boom, you can save it and send it as well. So, talked about sort of actions. The first thing, I'm a psychologist, and I sort of tease that 90% of the statistics that psychologists use are made up on the spot. And that's true for that one. But we do know this is that if you want to make a change and you've heard new information about it, if you don't start to take at least an initial step in the first 24 to 48 hours, the likelihood of you ever doing anything goes way, way down. That's where I don't have a stat for it, but we know that it's true. So what I'd like to encourage you, if you're interested in appreciation and trying to create a more positive workplace, start today, tomorrow, by just first of all thinking about somebody that you appreciate. And I think the easiest way to do is, who's that person that if they didn't do what they do, your life would be tougher, okay? And hopefully you got somebody like that. Otherwise, you're doing too much. Or you might think of somebody who's discouraged, and and say, hey, I just want to let you know that when you do this, that really helps me out and makes my life and day better. So we mentioned that words is the highest frequency, and so I think using that, you can write it, you can tell them, but start. And again, be specific about it. Don't just say, hey, thanks for all the good work you do. What's that mean? I mean, so try to get specific about it. and let them know how it impacts you personally or the organization. Um, Secondly, I think another action step is to explore the resources to help your team learn how to communicate authentic appreciation. And we've got the book, The Five Languages of Appreciation in the Workplace. And then there's sort of a title page of the inventory there that says MBA inventory. It's motivating by appreciation inventory. You can get codes separately for that. And by the way, we developed different versions for different industries because the actions really are different across different places. So we have a version for schools. We have a medical version for medical settings. We have a military version. We have a government version. We have a long distance version because how do you show appreciation to people who are far away is an issue. And we've also created this online train the trainer course that either you or somebody in your organization go on. It takes about an hour and a half to go through, and developed just a simple process of implementing this. It includes 4 10-minute videos. It's really turnkey. You got facilitators, guides, handouts that you can do in a half day or a series of 1 hour times over weeks. And we've got, I don't know, 750 trainers across the world that have taken that and use that. So, and then my Vibrant Workplace book is a really important follow-up to address the kinds of issues that often you encounter as far as lack of support from management, pushback from supervisors, busyness, negativity, difficult to appreciate colleagues, differences in culture, and that kind of stuff. So we address that as well.
Dr. Wright, you touched on this briefly, but I have a question for you. At Staffbase, several of our customers use our employee app platform to communicate with their remote workforce. So people that are non-desk, that like my colleagues live far away and work far away in Germany. I work over here in Boston. How do you use those languages when you have a remote team?
Yeah, so, which is huge because, as we were discussing earlier, I mean, the number of remote workers is increasing and even purely virtual teams. And yeah, I mean, the question is, how do you spend the quality time with somebody who's in another state or country or acts of service? And so what we did is we always work with our clients who have that situation and get input from them on what are the different kinds of actions that are important to you. What we found is that the languages and the examples of the languages in the primary part of the inventory are pretty much the same, but the actions are really different. So, for example, quality time. One of the problems of time is that in a face-to-face setting, you have sort of, serendipitous kinds of encounters where you're both walking out to go for lunch or going to the break room or whatever. You don't have that when you're remote, and so it takes more intentionality. And maybe you set up a time to talk or have a video conference or even just a chat time. And what's an interesting part of that is that most work-based conferences, calls, communication are work-based. I mean, it's about getting the work done. But most of those conversations, on the side are personal. So you have to set aside some time to chat with them and say, hey, how was your weekend? What'd you do this weekend? Or how are your kids doing, or whatever it might be, so that, and it can, one easy way to do is set up, you're going to touch base 15 minutes before the scheduled team conference call or stay on afterwards. And in fact, we did a poll with our remote team members, and one of the important things is that occasionally, at least, it should include a video component versus just talking on the phone or email. That creates a more personal sense. It's not rocket science, right? You're seeing the person and their facial expressions and so forth. Acts of service, the same kind of thing. There can be things that you can do to help somebody out, and that could be they're working on a project and say, hey, what kinds of things can I cover for you while you're focused on this project? Or are there ways that we can make this go better for you? And so in the remote setting, and even tangible gifts, it's sort of like, you find out, you do a little research and find out what their favorite coffee place is where they live, and you get them, a gift card for that. And again, it's not so much the gift, it's that you thought about them and you took the energy and effort to figure out what they liked, and do that. So there's ways around it. And so we developed a long distance version of the inventory to address those. I would say the key issue is that it it doesn't happen as spontaneously, and you've got to have some planning and forethought and a little bit more intentionality about it. Okay. So,
Yeah, that's exactly what one of our participants said. She was being more intentional.
yeah, exactly, and it takes that.
Yeah.
So here, just a reminder: if you want the handout of slides, just send us an email. I'll also send you a copy of the research that shows the data from 100,000 employees of how they want to be shown appreciation. And then also, I don't have it here, but I'll send you the ability to get a code to take our inventory just for $10, and that'll give you a really clear picture of what it provides and how to use it. Let me just say the impact of appreciation. We know that when associates feel valued, it improves the relationships both between supervisor and the people that they work with, as well as colleagues. It reduces tardiness and absenteeism because people don't have that sort of just resistance about when you go there. Clearly, it decreases turnover, which is a huge financial impact on organizations. I think one of the most practical things that it does is it diminishes that irritability and internal tension and conflict that just, you're like, what's wrong with them? And it's, it just life flows easier because when people feel valued, they're more secure and they're more willing to deal with, the little things that come up. Productivity increases partly because you're not having to deal with all this other trash going on around. And also, we've seen that customer satisfaction ratings go up as well because people are more cheerful in interacting, but also they're more likely to sort of solve that problem that's coming to them from the customer. The workplace is overall more positive, and like I said before, managers enjoy their jobs more. So there's a lot of good things that happen. And I would just encourage you all to close and can answer any other questions or address any other things. But I'm sure you have super quality teammates that you get to work with, and just take a minute to reflect on how well things go because of the team that you have. And if you think about someplace you worked that it wasn't so good, and be thankful that you aren't there anymore. And then just enjoy the day. One of the things we know is that when we have a positive attitude about life, life is tough, life is difficult, bad things happen, but like where I am today, it's a blue sky and sunshine, and it's just be thankful for all the different kinds of things that are going on in your life. So,
Great.
Carla, anything else you want me to
I
address?
want to know if the dog in that photo has our Staffbase employee app on his phone.
I don't think so, but I can check. So.
I also wanted to address just one other question here that I thought was important. Somebody asked, how often should they show appreciation to their colleagues?
Great question. We've identified that there's 4 core principles that underlie people truly feeling valued. And the first one is that appreciation is communicated regularly. Now, regularly, it's hard for me to say, first of all, but secondly, it differs according to the person and relationship. So if you're on a team that, they're a leader of a different team and you only see them, once a month at some kind of committee meeting, regularly there is very different than somebody that you're working with day to day, so your right-hand person. And also then it differs on sort of the status of your relationship, and do they need to be encouraged more, or they feel pretty comfortable. So I will say this: it's not just once a year at their review. Hopefully, we've gotten past that. And I had one IT group, again, sort of Upper Midwest, said, well, how about maybe twice a year? I said, nah, I think you got to step it up a little more than that. So part of it is to be able to understand that. Now the flip side of it is, and then I had a discussion with a group that was like, why do we have to tell people thanks? And there's some reasons, because it's a kind, courteous thing to do, and most of us expect to hear something every once in a while. But we shouldn't have to have a parade when they show up. I mean, it's sort of like it doesn't have to be every day, every week, hopefully. Um, but, I would, you have to sort of pace it according to the relationship and the work setting, but more than once or twice a year, I would say, for sure.
All right. That's a good start anyway, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Awesome.
I always say start somewhere with someone because you're going to get where you want to go quicker than if you don't do anything.
Awesome. Well, yeah, and I just wanted to mention too, for anybody that isn't familiar with Staffbase, we do provide our customers with employee apps that are branded to their specifications and that provide tools that help with communicating appreciation to your workforce. Things we have chat functionalities, messaging capabilities, push notifications that will reach your remote workers. So hopefully some of those tools will help with appreciation in the workplace. And we're very thankful, Dr. White, for you joining us today. We really have learned a lot and hope that we can implement some of that with our team at Staffbase as well. And for anybody that wants to learn more about us, you can go to staffbase.com. You can also go to Berlin, April 26th and 27th, and join us for our summit if you are able. Otherwise, I want to thank everyone for joining us and thank you for being interactive and asking questions. It was a great group today.
Yep. Thank you, Carla. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Have a good rest of the week, everyone. We appreciate you.